James is going to talk about Neil Young.
Oh yeah, so there's something to talk about. There we go. Everybody's talking. It's just like a Fred Neil song. Was it Fred Neil? About 1969. That was in the movie Midnight Cowboy, starring Angelina Jolie's father, John Boyd, who's now a truther. He thinks that I think he's a truther. Be careful. Maybe he's not. Yeah, Neil Young, Crazy Horse, Horse, the legend lives on. Rio de Janeiro, 2001. Neil Young used to be as thin as a rake. By about 20 years ago, he's starting to put on the pounds. Now you look at him nowadays, and it looks as though he's packed on the pounds. So I'm telling you, the people in Rio de Janeiro sure know how to party. Were we watching a Queen video, like a documentary in Rio de Janeiro, and the people were just going nuts? And I was watching another documentary. Yeah, some Bruce Springsteen footage, and it's quite recent. And man, oh man, they know how to rock out in Rio. You know, like the huge crowds. It looks like everyone in Brazil's there. There's a lot of people in Brazil. So it's almost like when my brother and I visited in New York. It was shocking when you're coming down to LaGuardia Airport, and you're still fairly high up, and you look in every direction that you can see, and you can't see anything but city. And when you look at some of this concert footage, you can't see anything but people. It's amazing, and they all seem to be very happy about the music. That having been said, if I'd been there, I wouldn't have been quite so ecstatic as the people there. I guess you had to be there, and maybe flying on some drugs. Like Neil Young with Crazy Horse. To me, there were two Crazy Horse albums with Neil Young, and one is the first Crazy Horse album released by Crazy Horse. Neil Young doesn't work with him, along with Jack Nitzsche. And that one actually isn't the greatest, but Neil Young's second solo album, the one with Cinnamon Girl and Down by the River and Cowgirl in the Sand and a few other nuggets. And two of the three I mentioned are on here, but maybe the best one is actually Cowgirl in the Sand. So the big trouble is Danny Whitten, For Whom the Needle and the Damage Done was written. Ended up committing slow motion suicide, being a heroin addict. And once he was gone, Crazy Horse wasn't the same. He sings fairly. I mean, he had a weird voice. It was kind of shaky, but he could kind of hit the notes. He sounded a bit like Steve Stills, only not quite as good singer. And he was a pretty darn good rhythm guitarist, and it just never was the same. Pete Sampedro I think he's still the rhythm guitarist, and he has been for Crazy Horse since about the mid 70s. It's just not the same thing, So I'm kind of used to seeing Neil Young and hearing him, more importantly, live, since the 90s. And what it tends to be is it's sludge at the same level of tempo. So did you notice that? A little bit that you listened to before you fell asleep.
I didn't fall asleep. You fell asleep. You fell asleep.
During it?
Yes, I had to get up and turn it off because it.
It was. It was just right at the end,
Okay.
and stuff like that. So the last song is. I missed Welfare Mothers, so I think that one is a faster tempo. See, that one actually put me to sleep, I was listening to Down by the River, and they did.
Well, I know you'll listen to this again.
Yeah, that
we
was
got
the plan.
a few of these that will go through music DVDs from Vulcan Public Library. So we'll be going through some music for the next few days.
Yeah. See, I kind of drifted off during Rocking in the Free World, and it's not a reflection necessarily if I drift off, because I'm on a chemo that causes drowsiness and fatigue. I listen to all the rest of it. But like I say, this is not an unqualified recommendation, because what I was going to say is the tempos tend to be the same for Neil Young when he's rocking out. So this is it when he's with Crazy Horse nowadays live. He tends to rock out, and that it wasn't the way it was with his second solo album. There's a country and western type of thing. There's a folk thing called Round and Round. There's a couple of country and western kind of sounding things. So he kind of mixes it up, and there's a 3/4 time thing, Round and Round, and so on and so forth. So it's what tends to happen when he's doing this Crazy Horse thing is it's sort of like a stomp, right? So it's about the tempo that Cinnamon Girl is. Do 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 do. There's nothing really fast, and nothing necessarily really slow. So it gets a little samey after a while. So there are a couple of people that I started liking roughly around the same period of time, about 1970, that I think were spoiled by success. So a certain type of success. So Van Morrison gets huge raves for Astral Weeks.
And it all sounds the same.
You've heard Astral Weeks, right?
No, Van Morrison all sounds the same. I don't like it. I know everybody likes him.
That's okay, but it definitely doesn't sound the same. So
it sounds the same to me.
Yeah. So do you know John Cougar Mellencamp did not a very good version of Wild Night?
I don't like John Cougar Mellencamp.
I know you don't. But the thing is, that's not the point. The thing is, he did something called Wild Night. He didn't do it nearly as wildly as Van Morrison. Or, that one I sometimes
I don't like rock music, so any rock music review, don't listen to me. Because if you like it, you won't like what I have to say about it.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it's important to know, like maybe the stuff that bothers you more.
Oh.
It's important to know where a reviewer sits on when it comes to certain things. You see what I'm saying? So if someone knows that you don't like rock and roll, they shouldn't take it to heart, So I saw a comment a while back on the thing that got me liking the Beatles, actually. They're my favorite group, long time. But I didn't like them initially. I liked the Dave Clark 5, but boy, that was bad taste. But the thing that turned it around for me was quite late. It's something off Revolver, and that's like the album before Sgt. Pepper, so it's 1966. And at least off the English version of Revolver, and it's called And Your Bird Can Sing. So there was this comment.
Are you going to sing it for me?
I can't, man.
Okay.
Oh man, it's too fast. And the thing I like is really the guitar, because
James sings most of the time, so I'm surprised I couldn't get him to try that.
Yeah, you're a very patient person. You put up with it. But yeah, it's got some interesting lyrics. It's kind of written, I think, to rich groupies, people who wanted to hang around with John Lennon. So it's you tell me that you got everything you want, and your bird can sing, but you don't get me. You don't get me. And you tell me that you've heard every sound there is, and your bird is green, but you don't hear me. You don't hear me. But then what he says, it's like, when your bird is broken, when you're feeling down, you may be awoken. I'll be wrong, but he's the one who's deciding when it is, right? So there's some sharp lyrics, but the thing that got me was they've got, I believe it's Harrison and McCartney. It's probably studio trickery, but they're playing the same guitar figure at the same time. Here's what someone once wrote. Sometimes rock critics get it right. Most of the time they're often wrong. John Lennon made George Harrison sound, but I think it's George Harrison and Paul McCartney sound like the best guitar player in the world on that song. And I don't know if it makes it 2 minutes. You get people, they've got no ideas, and the fewer ideas they got, the longer the song is. This is the main problem with disco. You listen to disco, and it's, wow, like you really want to move your booty. But then, my booty starts dragging after about a minute of just repetitive lyrics and stuff like that. My mind starts to wander, and like I start to slow down. It seems as though I've got to have some sort of intellectual, however low level it might be, intellectual stimulation in order, to get my feet tapped, and otherwise my mind starts wandering somewhere else. So so the thing that Van Morrison, what happens in Astral Weeks, it does sound, see, and jazz backing. There's a lot of blues stuff with jazz backing, but it's folk instrumentation and very long, extended pieces. I don't know if you know Madame George and things like that. The first time I heard Madame George, I was just entranced. I was at a party, one of those stupid parties where people were getting stoned. I didn't, it was before I, messed around a little bit with marijuana. And I was going, man, when's the excitement going to happen? And then they had a radio going, and I heard Madame George off Astral Weeks, and wow, that stoned me, But what happens is Van Morrison keeps on revisiting that, like he does these extended long pieces. To me, Van Morrison really at his best is a miniaturist. Wild Night is what, 2.5 minutes, maybe it's 3 minutes. It feels to me like it's 2.5 minutes. And Brown Eyed Girl, it's maybe 2.5 minutes, maybe it's 3 minutes. It always feels like it's 2 minutes to me. I always say with the Van Morrison's short wee miniature pieces, my favorite one might be I'm in Heaven. Jackie Wilson said, I'm in heaven when she smiles, or something like that. I sing it sometimes. Do 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 do. And I think I can actually the parrot singing. Is that do 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 do? You see, that's not like the slow stuff on Madame George. And Neil Young to me is a miniaturist. Close to my favorite song. This may be my favorite song, Cinnamon Girl, off that second album of his. It's over, and it might be 3.5 minutes. It feels like it's 2 minutes or something like that. There's even though it's the riff sounds
to Fly
repetitive.
is longer, no?
It is longer.
It's great.
But it's actually got some decent lyrics. The other thing is his lyrics have gone to kaput, because he's got this idea, just churn the stuff out and not work on it. But
he knows it's going to sell, no matter how much effort he puts into it. But it's like,
he's got this idea. There's two different ways of approaching things. There's the Beatles way, and that's Expecting to Fly, and pretty well anything that he did with Buffalo Springfield and his first solo album. And then there's the Rolling Stones way. But for Neil Young, it's really not the Rolling Stones way. It's the Bob Dylan way. You just basically you dash off the lyrics, and he doesn't realize Bob Dylan could dash off the lyrics because he's read so much and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you dash off the production in the studio and all this sort of stuff. Neil Young is not that talented. A jazz person can dash off stuff, right? So
musically.
Musically they can dash stuff off. They can make it off the top of their head.
Sure.
But you were listening to Neil Young, and you were being nicely ironic. You were saying, boy, he sure likes playing the guitar. And you were being ironic, right?
I said he sure loves playing his guitar.
Love, not likes. Yeah, exactly right. And
you can watch him on there. He's dancing with the thing. He's really
and it's tough for him. I'm amazed he does that because he had polio when he was a young pup.
Well, he must really.
I've talked with people who have got polio, and they say they've got to watch out how much work they do because, like exercise they do, because the muscle will atrophy. It won't. If you use it too much, it won't regenerate itself. Stuff like that. So
interesting.
But yeah, that kind of dancing thing, he always did it. Hi. And Jack Nietzsche was the guy who did all that production work on Expecting to Fly, all the atmospherics. He used to write music, classical music.
And you were mentioning the Rolling Stones earlier, and honestly, a lot of people, they all say, well, who's your favorite Rolling Stone or whatever.
Mhm.
Which one do you think is the talented one? And
Mhm.
I don't think very many people say Mick Jagger. But honestly, who came up with the piano on She Comes in Rainbows?
Well, it's a little guy called Nicky Hopkins. I'm almost
There
sure.
you go. So that's my favorite Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
Is Nicky Hopkins.
Nicky Hopkins, there
And
you go.
honestly,
He might be your favorite member of Jefferson Airplane. You know,
He might be.
At Woodstock,
Yes.
Nicky Hopkins, he was a studio musician. He's playing a piano for Jefferson Airplane. Right?
But there's no way that, I mean, neither Keith Richards nor Mick Jagger had anything to do with that piano piece
Yeah.
that makes that song. And
Yeah.
you know that, or you should know that. So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, what I liked about that song was Punk was the trade-off between kind of like the rhythm section, more the drums rhythm, and the piano. I mean, it's kind of like Mozart with a backbeat. And then, you know, I often say to Pauline, I generally prefer the Rolling Stones when they're playing against type. I wouldn't say generally, but oftentimes. So my favorite song off their Sticky Fingers album, 1971, is the last song. It was written for Bianca Jagger, and it is it's got orchestration by a guy called Paul Bachmaster, who early on in John Elton's career used to do orchestration. I'm talking about an orchestra. Mm-hmm. And then it's got just 2 chords, and except for right near the end, when it reaches its emotional peak, it's got a 5th chord. But everything else, as I recall, is just a root and a 4th. And it's kind of like an attempt to sound oriental. I think Jagger was saying Bianca kind of looks oriental or something like that. She really came from Nicaragua, I think, originally. But kind of a weird look. She looked a little bit like Mick Jagger, a little oriental, and she looked very exotic. So, yeah, he did this song. And it's you know, there's a lot of what sounds like acoustic guitar, and then it's hard to explain what it is, but it's not Jumpin' Jack Flash by any means, or Brown Sugar, which opens up that album. So to a large extent, that's when I like them the best. So yeah, Keith Richards, I used to dismiss him when I was a kid, but then I found out he's the one who basically wrote "Gimme Shelter." That is, I was talking to
Yeah, it's a good song.
I was talking to a music professor who's almost exactly the same age as me, so he'd be about 65 now. He's still teaching, that's good. And I was saying, you know, I was kind of dismissing it. I was saying that, you know, they haven't, Keith Richards hasn't changed his guitar tuning since, the way he tunes his guitars, open tuning they picked up from Ry Cooder, and that's Honky Tonk Women. Well, that was released in the summer of 1969. I don't know when it was actually put in the can. It could have been late 68, but probably 69. And he said, you know, I said, you know, like, name me something that's a classic of theirs. Now, this is a music prop. And he said, there's always Give Me Shelter. And all I said was, yeah, there always is Give Me Shelter. And apparently that was put together. The sound of it was Keith Richards. A lot of stuff, Moonlight Mile was probably written pretty well 100% by Jagger, with help from Mick Taylor, the other guitarist. But at any rate, what happened with Neil Young is he got this critical recognition for the 2 long extended kind of jam pieces on his second album, Cowgirl in the Sand and Down by the River. Not just critical, people loved it. You know? And he just keeps on, every time he gets back together with Crazy Horse, once every 15 years or so, I'm exaggerating, maybe 5 years or 10 years, he always wants to duplicate that stuff. And what I want to hear from him are the short pieces like Cinnamon Girl, or there's a song off of his 3rd album after the Gold Rush called When You Dance. I can really love. He'd never be able to do it quite the same way because he has this classically trained piano player, Jack Nietzsche, playing Jerry Lee Lewis kind of piano. And that one's a fairly short piece. I think it's under 4 minutes. So that's what I want to hear from him, and just maybe every so occasionally these longer jam things, but interspersed. I'm figuring this is 112 minutes long, and I'm figuring if he stuck to how many songs? There's 11 songs, performances, whatever you want to call it. If he'd done 3-minute songs, just 3-minute songs, instead of 11 songs, he would have done something like 37 cuts. It's 37 songs. I'd rather hear 37 Neil Young songs. Cut down to 3 minutes and not 11 songs just extended jams. He's not the greatest guitar player in the world. He's definitely not the worst.
Well, the singing is...
Well, the singing is very hard to take. You know, Buffalo Springfield originally wouldn't let him sing lead. We tried to minimize
Oh,
lead.
you still have time.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. It felt like you were talking forever about Neil Young.
Sure, exactly right. Well, yeah, you know.
No, I love that you love music. I love hearing you talk about it, actually.
No, I don't
really
take that badly.
passionate
It's
about
just like you don't know the stuff, right, that I'm talking about generally. So it will seem kind of interminable.
No,
It's
I
like-
love that you actually know, you understand the music like it's a language. That's what I like about your take on music.
Well, the stuff that well, you know, from the stuff that you know, like Fleetwood Mac, You Can Go Your Own Way, that I've listened to that. Like I talk about how it's put together.
Oh, and I
You
love
know,
that. It
and
makes
I
me
talk about the
appreciate
way
the song
that
more. And I think other people would like to hear
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah. Oh, one of these days I might do
Yeah.
a review of
That
that
album.
whole album.
Sure.
Because
'Cause it's
kind
worth
of
sitting
drags on
through.
the second side. But,
I love how you do that.
Yeah.
How you listen to things and you hear the communication. Like I'd watched something where what's his name? Not Mr. Dresser. The one I like.
Friendly Giant.
No, well I like Friendly Giant.
Oh, I
yeah.
love Friendly Giant.
He's wonderful.
But
again, with
oh, yeah,
Friendly
Mr.
Giant,
Rogers.
he plays the music.
Yeah, Mr.
Yeah,
Rogers.
I was thinking
well,
Mr.
even Mr. Dressup did music.
Yeah.
as I recall.
Oh, I know.
He was mainly an art guy.
Yeah, but very different personality types. And
Yeah, I don't
With-
think I'd like Mr. Dressup, but who knows? I did like the way he did art. I love the way he did art, and
Yeah.
he was way too young for me. You know, it's
Yeah.
just. Yeah. As a
but-
teenager, I'd watch him doing the art and say, "I'm jealous." You know?
yeah, but yeah, Mr. Rogers. I was watching something with him, and he was talking about how he was talking to some jazz musicians that were playing together, and he was like, "It's a way you're talking to each other or whatever with the instruments." Like he could hear that,
Sure.
right? And you can hear that too. That it's a communication, a means of
Well,
communication.
the funny thing about Lindsey Buckingham is basically, to me, the heart. Well, I'd say maybe the soul, maybe not the heart, because I don't think he's a very nice person by most accounts. But he's a very, very talented person. And the thing is, like when his solo albums, he plays almost everything, including the drums. Every so occasionally he'd bring in the rhythm section, the actual Fleetwood Mac, John McVie and Mick Fleetwood to play, but he can play the stuff himself. But when he's working with Fleetwood Mac, he gives. You know, there's Stevie Nicks songs tend to be like if I put this chili out on the table, just they got no structure. They got no internal structure, like when it comes to the way bars are built up.
Oh,
and they tend to
I know. He's
overflow the
the
limits, right?
talent of that band.
Well,
And
she's
when
got some talent with lyrics. You know, I don't want to demean
she has an
her,
interesting
you know.
sounding voice,
And she's got a
and
good voice.
she has a
yeah.
good look. So she's a good
She dressed
frontman
really well,
for the-
differently.
for the band, right?
And you know, here's the thing that gets me: so many of my favorite groups. It's the Beatles, Everly Brothers, Mamas and the Papas. How many guys would be willing to admit that they adore the Mamas and the Papas at their best? It's harmonies. You know, I love hearing. You know, even weird ones like the Beatles had a very weird harmony kind of thing. But that to me is really the strength of Fleetwood Mac as a group. Lindsey Buckingham does so much stuff, production and so on and so forth. And I swear he actually helps people out with their compositions. Like he will give a
Oh, sure.
A little riff.
Like Paul
that,
McCartney would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Paul McCartney was really in that way the soul, if not the heart, of the Beatles. Come Together was, like the original Chuck Berry thing that was ripped off. So here's how Come Together starts. Here come old flat top, he come grooving up slowly. It's an old song by Chuck Berry called You Can't Catch Me. And it's about like a chitty chitty bang bang vehicle that can fly. And so what Chuck Berry did, the thing that's amazing, but this is I think the 50s, maybe early 60s, you can't catch me. Oh baby, you can't catch me. Because if you get too close, I'm gone like a cool breeze.
Yeah, that's good.
It's like Keith Richards once said, I don't care who you are, you'll never be more important than Chuck Berry. Now that's an overstatement, but in art circles, as far as I'm concerned, that applies. The guy could really put some lyrics out, he could slap some lyrics down, and he could put some tunes together. So that's the original pace of Come Together. So here come Juju, he comes grooving up slowly. And it's Paul McCartney who said, hey, let's just slow it down. And he came up with that heavy bass sort of thing. So, it's Paul McCartney did that, I'm afraid, again and again and again and again and again and again with John Lennon pieces. But it's not just him. Like, it's George Harrison. George Harrison would try to contribute. He tried to contribute to Hey Jude. Got him in hot water. Because Paul McCartney, it's a very spare kind of thing. Until the end, when you got that coda, and you've got, or tail end of it, and you got this orchestra coming in. It's fairly subtle, but the way George Harrison loved to throw everything, the kitchen sink and whatever else is hanging around in the kitchen at you. So paprika or whatever. So what he wanted was, Hey Jude, guitar. Don't make it better. I'm afraid Paul McCartney put his foot down, maybe on George Harrison's jugular. But Harrison really, really contributed too. They say he knew a lot of chords. He wasn't a great lead player, but he knew a lot of chords. And I think he'd give you a lot of extra stuff. Let's try this, let's try that, in a fairly quiet way. If stubborn at times. I think he's a very stubborn individual. So, it's Lindsey Buckingham. They put Matt fired. They went on tour. Maybe last year. And I'm like, well, you just fired the band. Okay. That was stupid. The thing is, it wasn't that stupid because they hired a couple of guitars to replace them, and that's what they had to do in order to replace them. They needed 2 guitarists.
Yeah, what you said at the time was they just made themselves into a cover band of themselves.
They were a cover band of themselves, and they'll do the covers stuff, but they're creative. They're not creative force anymore. They can't do it. They weren't much before Lindsey Buckingham. And Stevie Nicks sold the records, but Lindsey Buckingham is the person that really made them the sound. And they won't be much. I think they basically gave up on recording new stuff.